to Meet the World in Wood Buffalo. Today our topic is discrimination against mainstream Caucasian people, against Aboriginal and gay people, against different other aspects of the community that we haven't already covered. So we have as our panel today a very impressive group of people here. Diane Slater is with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. We have Robbie Picard.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to finally be on your show.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have Alejandra Ravenstein, who represents the Spanish community in Fort McMurray.
Thank you for having me.
So now we're going to talk about the different aspects of discrimination that we haven't already covered. So Diane, how have you experienced this in your life in Fort McMurray, and what do you feel about it?
I think women were discriminated. We were the lesser numbers, let me put it that way. And so respect was not always paid to us. And it was very difficult 36 years ago living here in Fort McMurray with that dominance of that male population and all of those horrible things that go with it. Also, I remember when I moved to Fort McMurray, I was a big city girl. I came from Vancouver, and I was just shocked that women were down in Safeways with their hair in rollers. And I'm going, what the heck, right? Like, we got to change this. And so I've had the pleasure of seeing that evolve, seeing women come out into suits and own their own businesses. So it's been a wonderful experience for me. I found some of our dialogue earlier this evening shocking. I didn't realize it happened. So I can really appreciate the value of things like tonight.
Robbie, can you give us a brief idea about what you have experienced being an Aboriginal and a gay person in our community?
I've been in Fort McMurray for 10 years, and I'm a pretty strong person, but I have to admit, when people found out I was gay, their reaction to me was stranger than coming from a big city, and it was something that I wasn't exactly used to. So I mean, it was sort of, it was like 10 years behind almost. So like the reaction, like someone wouldn't want to sit with you because you're gay, or they might think that you might instantaneously try to turn them gay. Even if they weren't hot and you weren't into them, they would assume that just because you were gay that you were into them, which is really not how it is. So it was sort of like a bit of an adjustment, but I think it's come, like she said, I've only been here 10 years, but it's come a long way in that sense. I'm Métis, but I grew up essentially white, so that's an interesting kind of, I kind of experienced it a little bit, but not a whole ton. But I also kind of, I'm not very politically correct, and I'm pretty direct, right? So what I'm finding now too is we're shifting in a way too where you got to watch everything you say, how you say it, because you don't want it to be considered that you're like that you're being discriminated, or you're trying to discriminate against someone, or if it's beyond their comfort zone. So that's kind of been an interesting twist that I see too, because everyone's so terrified to make a joke or say anything now because it might offend someone. So it's almost gone a little bit too far in one sense.
Oh, wow, that's a super perspective. Political correctness is something that ails society. And I don't know how far we can go with, defining what is harmful and what's harmless. And it's very hard to actually make that clear distinction. But thank you very much for that perspective. We are going to talk to Alejandra about how she has experienced, how she has lived here, and what her parents told her when she was growing up, and how it impacted how she felt towards her friends.
So I arrived to Canada when I was 13, and when I came here, I had no idea what Canada was about. I couldn't even point it in the map. But my parents would tell me, do not become friends with Canadian people because they're overly sexualized, they do drugs, they will get you into all kinds of troubles, and they are disrespectful to their parents, which was one of the big ones as well. And it took me a long time to get over that. I mean, I wasn't friends with any Canadian person until maybe 2 years after I arrived to Canada. And when I became friends with her, she wasn't what my parents explained, what they described. She was completely normal, which surprised me. Like, how is this person Canadian and normal at the same time, right? But no, I mean, they still believe that, and there's lots of people from other countries that will not be friends with Canadian people because they believe these things. They believe that they are always getting into trouble, that they're criminals even. Sometimes they will do drugs, they will be having sex before marriage, that kind of stuff. And I found out that, to be honest, most cultures have people that do those things and that don't. So it doesn't matter which culture you are, you're still just as likely to go into one path as to the other.
Yeah, so many times people think that, where does all this come from? What's the reason for this racism and discrimination? Because kids are not born racist. I have a rule in my house, I never send my kids for sleepovers. Doesn't matter whose house it is, period. So it's not as if, the things that happen during the night cannot happen in the day, but it's much more difficult for those things to happen. So we deliberately avoid sending kids out for sleepovers. It's not common practice in India either. So for me, that's just one rule I have. And my kids got to be home before 10, at least. My son is 17 and my daughter's 13, and I expect them, even after school parties, to be home before 10. And if they are not, then I go pick them up.
But those are not things, those are things that all parents should be doing so that we can try to minimize some of the challenges that our society is facing, is have rules. Not saying that everybody has to agree with 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever.
If I can interrupt you there, this is something that I lived while I was younger. When I was 17, my parents had the same rules. I had to be home at 10 and whatnot. And then I saw my friends going out after 10s. They were at the movies until almost midnight. And I saw it. It was so unfair. And this is mostly Canadians who do that.
Why not out after 10? Well, that's the question.
Well, for me, I need to sleep at a certain time. And if my child is not in the bed, I can't sleep. It just bothers me that, God knows what situation they're in and if everything's okay with them. I just find that they're more safe when there's light out and it's much.
Do you think that, I guess families that kind of like immigrate to Canada, do they have a stronger family connection than Canadian, like, have been here for multiple generations? Like my friends from Saskatoon are Greek, right? Their families just stick together. My parents didn't care what time I was home. They didn't seem to really care. So it was a completely different way of growing up than.
To a certain extent, I have to agree. Many of our backgrounds are very much more about community living, right? So like, in India, we used to have huge families with uncles and aunts and grandpas and everybody there. So we never needed a babysitter to take care of the child because there was always somebody at home. Yeah. We come from those kind of environments, and where now nuclear families are more commonplace. But when you come to a country which is so individualistic, where the mom and dad don't even have a say to who you marry. Like, in my country, I had an arranged marriage. My mom and dad told me that this is a short list of candidates. You can meet them and see which one you want to marry, but that's it.
Honestly, that would have made everything easier, I'm just going to say.
So I'm going to change the topic a little. We've talked about the fact that people are relocating. Canadians are relocating. Lots of people live here from elsewhere around Canada. What about the seniors? I just turned 65, and ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, it's a shame on how we treat our seniors in this country. And in Fort McMurray, we're going to have some issues because families need grandmas and grandpas. Totally. They need them. And if we don't start getting facilities and things for them so that they can move here and become part of the community, we're going to lose out because people are going to move home because they're going to have to take care of mom and dad at some time.
Totally, I agree. That's the only fear I have because when my husband lost his mom, he couldn't actually travel down for the funeral. It's really hard. And it's kind of an issue, but right now we're talking about discrimination, so I don't know how far we've strayed from our topic. So how do you think seniors are discriminated against? What do you see as the...
Why I think they're discriminated here is because everybody says, oh, but they only account for 2.5% of the population.
So you don't have to worry about that?
Don't have to worry about them.
That's tragic. In indigenous communities, they hold a very, very strong place. What do you have to say about that?
I think the sense of family, like for Aboriginal families, like I think the grandmother plays a greater role in the child care than even the parents in some cases. Like it's sort of a different thing on family. So most of my friends are seniors now, so I mean I have a lot of friends that are seniors, and I sympathize to their needs. I think as a community we need to start having real honest conversations about different issues, whether there be religion, aging, being gay, and kind of come to, we're too politically correct to have a fight, and we almost need to have a really heated discussion to understand. Like I fear different religions that want to change Canadian law. That's a different form of, we're so politically correct that we're not going to ask about different laws that could possibly change, or people want to change laws. At the same time, though, if those laws or that view could set what we've come, I mean, we have equal rights if you're gay. That wasn't the case 10 years ago, so that's all been changed. So we need to kind of have a look at how our community is changing. It's changing rapidly. Have honest conversations and see how we can. Because on one hand, we became to a point where it wasn't okay to discriminate, which is good. But now we're getting to the point where we're being pulled apart in a different way, I think.
So how do you think that you can take action, or you can move something in a way that doesn't allow discrimination to continue? Or
we need to get to know each other. So like,
Is it understanding each other?
Yeah.
I think it's understanding each other, and your parents didn't understand Canadian people. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Right? And so your idea of having a multicultural center where all nationalities can be there and people can go and visit at their leisure and share the information, the knowledge, the whatever it is, we have to start sharing. I like the word you used, Robbie. We need to start the conversation.
That's
If I
totally
can add
it,
to
yeah.
that,
Of course you can.
even within other communities, like it's not just my Spanish people being discriminated towards Canadians. It's also Spanish people towards even Indian people or other people, like gay community as well. Like we need to all become one people. Like why do we have to be just one community,
Exactly.
another community, another community?
Yeah,
like we should just share and just become one whole community.
I know that, like my daughter's been telling me this, that, I'm probably not going to get married to an Indian man. Would you mind that, Mom? I was like, no, I really wouldn't mind that. You just have to find out whether that person has integrity. And if you think that person is educated and has integrity, please go ahead and get married to him. But it's very hard for most Indian parents to say that, because it takes them completely out of their comfort zone. Right? They don't know whether the kind of respect that is there in Indian families is something that they will get if the child goes out and marries another person. They don't know whether the customs and traditions of Indian families will be passed on down the generations. They fear a lot of things. And I think unless you let go, you're not going to be able to see change happen or move into the future, because the future is not going to be like yesterday.
My parents basically just passed out when I brought home a boyfriend, first boyfriend. He was Canadian, so obviously they had a huge problem with that. I dated him for a long time, a year and a half, something like that, and every single day they would come up with different reasons why I should break up with him. Oh no, he's too big, he's too tall, he was a redhead, so no, he's too redhead. And there was all of these ridiculous reasons, and they never liked him. And then it's really funny that you mentioned that, because I actually ended up marrying a Venezuelan guy from the same city that I was born and everything like that. So
Yeah, it's so strange how these
You think
things
your
happen.
parents passed out?
no, trust me, it was just
Yeah, no,
as
I know what you're
bad.
saying. I have a question for Mary. So my question is, coming to Canada, and then with arranged marriage, so that's your tradition. How do you feel letting that go? Is that hard, or is that something that because you're in an interesting position, because you're dealing with the best things that Canada offers, and your position, and you're dealing with all different types of multicultures. How do you handle that on a personal, family level?
Being in my role, I have seen all kinds of really amazing people from all cultures and what they can bring to Canada, the positive side, and I think that's amazing, like awesome. If it's tapped well, Canada can really shine. I've also seen the other side, like what worries you. There are some things that worry me too. So we as a community need to state what are those things we really love about our communities. What is it that we want to keep in our communities, and we don't want that to be broken, because those are sacred for us. And the rest of it, we're ready to let go, because as human beings, we're all the same wherever we come from. We are worried about our families, we want to keep it together, we love, we care, and the things we treasure, we don't want anybody to touch those. So just understanding and respecting, like Diane said.
What do you fear, like more specifically?
I really I'm worried about, as you said, laws being changed and things happening without people speaking up about it, because I find that a lot. Like I'm Christian, so I find that many times, like the acceptance of different things that are out there is much more than mainstream Christianity, for example. So that bothers me sometimes. If there is acceptance, it has to be on either side. It has to be for everybody. It has to not only be for everything else other than your own, it has to be for everybody.
See, I'm the same way. So it's like the values that Canada has as a country and as a democracy that has allowed everyone to come and have a better life. What scares me is that you find that not everybody wants that. They don't necessarily want to have the same freedoms. They want to take it back. And how do you manage that? And that's the delicate balance, I suppose, of.
I find that a lot of immigrants, they come to Canada and they expect to behave and do the same things that they were doing in their own country. So that's why my parents, they would only hang out with other Venezuelan people, maybe Colombians, maybe other Spanish community, but they would never stray from that. So they wanted everybody to always do what they wanted. So they wanted Canadians to believe in what they believe. They didn't want to conform to whatever Canada's doing.
So why come to Canada then?
So the only reason why we came to Canada is because the stuff in our country was it was doing really bad.
Politically.
Politically, yes. I mean, so that's the reason. If they could have had a choice, obviously they would have stayed there and they would have been happy for the rest of their lives, but they had to come here, right? So that
and that must be hard. That's incredibly hard, because you don't want to leave and you're forced out because of reasons outside your control. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is completely foreign to me.
And they're completely scared because they don't want their kids to become what they fear.
Yeah, and just move that into the scale of India. In India, you have every 10 kilometers, you have a new language. And imagine the number of linguistic groups that are there in India. So you move all these Indian people to Canada, and then you have this Gujarati population. They speak in Gujarati. I don't understand Gujarati. You speak in Punjabi, then you have 200 families talking Punjabi. And then you have few South Indian people talking their language. And then you have all these different language groups. Yeah. So we are not Indian anymore. We are only this linguistic minority. And that breaks my heart, because to me, when I was in Bombay, it was about everybody coming together. Doesn't matter which language you are, we all speak English and Hindi. Now, I don't find that. I don't find that connectedness within our Indian communities. I find that they just want to, as you said, form that little clique of language groups, and that's all they want to represent, and they want to create their own little provinces within Canada.
We Canadians do exactly the same thing. It's.
Oh, you're from Halifax. Oh, you're from Newfoundland.
Well, no, it's not. It's, I need to get higher on the social ladder. Well, the social ladder doesn't really mean anything. What matters is, and I don't know, I'm just going to share this. When I retired, I created a Facebook page, and it's called Diane Slater Community Matters. And because this is how I operated when I was with the chamber, I used to say, I have this balloon that sits up there. When I had to make a decision, I'd look up and go, does it fit? And what was in that balloon was making Fort McMurray the best place to live, work, play, and do business. If it fit, I'd go ahead and do it. Even if the board gave me heck, I'd do it, because that was the right thing to do for the community.
If everybody thought like that, Diane, this place would have been great.
It doesn't matter where you sit on that ladder. We're all people.
We are. And that's something we forget. If you get angry at someone, everyone wants the same things. They just want a better life for their family. They want to earn a good living.
I'm really so happy to have Diane Slater, Robbie Picard, and Alejandra as our panelists today. I really thank you so much for your amazing perspectives. I've never had such an amazing discussion before. I'm so thankful to each one of you for bringing these amazing perspectives to our show today. And join us again for another show later next week for The World Meets in Wood Buffalo.